The hammer struck the anvil with such force that sparks showered across the smithy floor, and Zelda Everhart barely noticed the way men stopped in their tracks to stare at her working the metal like it weighed nothing at all. It was 1883, and the desert town of Monticello, Utah had seen its share of peculiar sights, but a woman who could swing a 20-pound sledgehammer with the ease of tossing a dinner roll still drew attention she neither wanted nor appreciated. Her brother Marcus ran the smithy, but everyone knew Zelda did half the heavy work, and that made the townsfolk uncomfortable in ways they expressed through whispers and sideways glances. She wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her leather glove, leaving a smudge of soot across her forehead. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly through the open front of the shop, and the heat from the forge made the whole space feel like the inside of an oven. Marcus had gone to collect payment from the Hendersons 3 miles out of town, leaving her to finish the order of horseshoes for the new ranch hand who was supposed to arrive any day now. She did not mind the solitude. In fact, she preferred it to the constant commentary about how unnatural it was for a woman to possess such strength. The metal glowed orange-red as she pulled it from the forge with iron tongs, placing it carefully on the anvil. Another series of precise strikes shaped the curve exactly right. She had been doing this since she was 12 years old, ever since their father had died and Marcus, only 16 at the time, had needed help keeping the business afloat. Now she was 22, and the calluses on her hands told the story of a decade spent mastering a trade most men struggled with. "That's some mighty fine work you're doing there." The voice startled her, deep and smooth with a hint of amusement. Zelda looked up to find a man leaning against the doorframe, his tall frame silhouetted against the bright sunlight outside. As her eyes adjusted, she took in the details. A dusty brown hat pushed back to reveal sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at the collar, and eyes the color of honey that seemed to catch the light from her forge. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, denim and leather worn soft from use, and a bandana tied loosely around his neck. "Are you the one waiting on horseshoes?" she asked, setting down her hammer and regarding him with cautious interest. "That would be me." Preston Ellis, recently hired on at the Double Creek Ranch. He pushed off from the doorframe and stepped into the shop, removing his hat in a gesture of politeness that seemed instinctive rather than calculated. "Though I was expecting Marcus Everhart to be doing the shoeing." "Marcus is my brother. I do the metalwork as often as he does." Zelda kept her voice level, waiting for the inevitable reaction. It always came, that moment when men realized they were dealing with a woman doing man's work, and their expressions would shift to something between pity and disapproval. But Preston simply nodded, moving closer to examine the horseshoes she had already completed. He picked one up, testing its weight and running his thumb along the smooth curve of metal. "These are excellent. Better than most I've seen, actually. The balance is perfect." Zelda felt something unexpected flutter in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the forge. Compliments on her work were rare enough, but genuine ones from someone who actually knew quality craftsmanship were rarer still. "Thank you. I'll have the full set ready by tomorrow afternoon." "No rush. I brought my horse in case you needed to check the fit." Preston replaced the horseshoe on the workbench and met her eyes directly, and in that moment, Zelda saw something she had never quite encountered before. There was no judgment in his gaze, no discomfort or disapproval. He looked at her the way one skilled craftsperson might regard another, with simple respect and interest. "That would be helpful," she admitted. "Some horses have particular needs depending on their gait and the terrain they cover most often. Solomon's a steady walker, good on rocky ground." I do a lot of boundary riding, checking fence lines and looking for strays in rough country. Preston settled his hat back on his head and glanced toward the street. I can bring him around now if you have time. Zelda nodded, banking the forge fire to a lower heat. She followed Preston outside, grateful for even the slight relief of open air, though the Utah sun was unforgiving this time of year. His horse stood tied to the hitching post, a handsome bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Solomon, apparently sensing his name in the conversation, nickered softly as they approached. "Hey there, friend," Zelda murmured, offering her hand for the horse to sniff. She had always been good with animals, another trait that seemed to unsettle people when combined with her physical strength. But Solomon accepted her immediately, nudging her palm with his soft muzzle. She ran her hands down his front legs, feeling the bones and tendons, checking his current shoes and noting how they had worn. "He lands heavy on the outside," she observed, straightening up. "I'll angle the new shoes slightly to help correct that. Should make him more comfortable over long distances." Preston looked genuinely impressed. "You can tell all that just from looking and feeling, yes. Every horse is different. The good blacksmiths understand that." She patted Solomon's neck and the horse leaned into the touch. "He's a good one. You take care of him properly. He's saved my life more than once, so it's the least I can do." Preston untied the reins but made no move to mount. Instead, he seemed content to stand there in the shade of the smithy's overhang, watching her with open curiosity. "How long have you been doing this kind of work?" 10 years, give or take." Zelda crossed her arms, partly defensive and partly to keep herself from fidgeting under his steady regard. "My father was the smithy before Marcus. He taught us both, though Marcus has more of a head for the business side of things. And you have the skill." It was not a question but a statement of fact, delivered without any hint of the condescension she had grown accustomed to hearing. "Some people would say it is not appropriate skill for a woman to have," she replied, testing him, waiting to see if his courtesy was just a thin veneer over the same old prejudices. Preston considered this for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Some people say a lot of foolish things. I found it's better to judge folks by what they can do rather than what other people think they should do." Before Zelda could respond, a harsh voice cut through the afternoon air. "Zelda Everhart, what have I told you about showing yourself off in public like this?" She turned to see Mrs. Thornton approaching, the older woman's face pinched with disapproval. Mrs. Thornton had appointed herself the moral guardian of Monticello's female population, and she had particular opinions about Zelda's chosen occupation. Behind her trailed her daughter Constance, a pale, willowy girl of 19 who kept her eyes downcast as always. "I am working, Mrs. Thornton, same as I do every day," Zelda said evenly, though her jaw tightened with the effort of keeping her voice calm. "Working in men's clothing, covered in soot, displaying strength that is unseemly in a woman." Mrs. Thornton's eyes flicked to Preston, and her expression grew even more severe. "And entertaining strange men without a chaperone. It is shameful behavior." "The lady is conducting business," Preston interjected smoothly, but with an edge of steel beneath the courtesy. "And doing it with more skill than most men I have met. I fail to see what is shameful about honest work, madam." Mrs. Thornton drew herself up, her bosom swelling with indignation. "Young man, I do not know who you are, but in this town, we have standards of proper behavior." Zelda has been told repeatedly that her excessive strength and refusal to behave like a lady reflects poorly on her family and our community. "My excessive strength is what keeps food on our table and shoes on the horses that pull your carriage, Mrs. Thornton," Zelda said, her patience finally fraying. Perhaps you should worry less about how I earn my living and more about your own affairs." The older woman gasped as if Zelda had struck her. Such insolence! It is no wonder no decent man will have you. What man wants a wife who can lift more than he can? You are too strong, girl, in body and in will, and it will leave you alone and bitter. The words struck deeper than Zelda wanted to admit, finding the soft places she usually kept well armored. She had heard variations of this theme her entire adult life, but it never quite stopped hurting. She opened her mouth to respond, but Preston spoke first. "I reckon Zelda is exactly as strong as she needs to be," he said. And though his tone remained pleasant, there was an unmistakable authority in it. "Seems to me that a woman who can work hard, create beautiful things, and stand on her own 2 feet is exactly the kind of person any community should value. If some men feel threatened by that, well, that says more about them than it does about her." Mrs. Thornton sputtered, her face reddening. "I never. Constance, come along. We will take our business elsewhere." She grabbed her daughter's arm and marched away, though not before shooting Zelda a look that promised future retribution. An awkward silence settled over the street. Zelda stared at Preston, caught between gratitude and embarrassment. "You did not have to do that. Mrs. Thornton has influence in this town, and she could make trouble for you at the ranch. Mrs. Thornton does not sign my pay vouchers, and even if she did, some things are worth saying regardless of the consequences." Preston's honey-colored eyes found hers again, and she saw sincerity there that made her throat tight. "I meant what I said. You are strong enough for this work, strong enough for this life. Anyone who tells you different is wrong." "Strong enough for this work," she repeated softly, testing the words. "But most people think I should want different work, a smaller life." "Do you want a different life?" he asked. Zelda thought about the feel of metal yielding under her hammer, the satisfaction of creating something useful and lasting with her own 2 hands, the fierce joy of being good at something difficult. "No," she said firmly. "This is exactly the life I want. Then that is all that matters." Preston gathered Solomon's reins and swung up into the saddle with easy grace. "I will be back tomorrow for those shoes, and maybe if you have time, you might show me around Monticello a bit. I am still learning my way around town." Her heart did an unexpected skip. "I could do that. After I close the shop for the day." "It is a date, then." He tipped his hat to her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, and urged Solomon into an easy walk down the main street. Zelda stood watching him go, one hand pressed to her chest where that unfamiliar warmth had settled and was refusing to fade. A date. When was the last time anyone had asked her for anything that resembled a date? She could not remember, and that realization was both sad and strangely exhilarating. She had grown so accustomed to being seen as unwomanly, too strong, too independent, that the possibility of being seen differently had stopped seeming real. She returned to the smithy with renewed energy, finishing Preston's horseshoes with particular care. As she worked, her mind wandered over the brief conversation, examining it from different angles like she might examine a piece of metal for flaws. But there were no hidden barbs in his words, no subtle put-downs disguised as compliments. He had looked at her work and seen quality. He had looked at her and seen someone worth defending. Marcus returned just before sunset, dusty and tired but satisfied. Henderson's paid in full, plus ordered new hinges for their barn door. "We are doing well, Zell. We had another customer today, Preston Ellis, new hand at Double Creek." She showed him the horseshoes, still neatly arranged on the workbench. "He is coming back tomorrow." Something in her voice must have given her away because Marcus looked at her with sudden interest. "Coming back for the shoes or coming back to see you?" "Both, maybe." She busied herself with cleaning tools, not meeting his eyes. He asked if I would show him around town afterward. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. You like him? I just met him, Marcus. I do not know him well enough to like him or not like him. But the protest sounded weak, even to her own ears. You like him, Marcus repeated, a smile creeping into his voice. And you know what? Good. You deserve someone who sees you properly, Zell. You have spent too long letting this town make you feel like you are somehow wrong. Zelda finally looked up at her brother, this man who had always supported her, even when the world pushed back against everything she was. What if he is just being polite? What if tomorrow he changes his mind? Then he is a fool and not worth your time. Marcus squeezed her shoulder. But from the way you are glowing right now, I suspect he is not going to change his mind. That night, Zelda lay in bed in the small room above the smithy, listening to the sounds of Monticello settling into darkness. Dogs barking in the distance, the occasional horse passing by, the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees that lined the creek running through town. She thought about Preston's words, the easy way he had accepted her, the look in his eyes that suggested he saw something in her worth knowing better, strong enough for this work, strong enough for this life. What if she was also strong enough to let herself hope? The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zelda completed the horseshoes by mid-morning, but she found herself compulsively rechecking them, making sure each one was perfect. Marcus, to his credit, said nothing about her unusual fussiness, though she caught him grinning at her more than once. She changed her work dress twice before settling on her usual practical clothes, then felt foolish for even considering wearing something different. Preston had seen her covered in soot and sweat yesterday and had not seemed bothered. Trying to present herself as something she was not would be a poor way to start whatever this was. He arrived in the early afternoon, leading Solomon and carrying a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. Zelda's heart did that strange skipping thing again at the sight of him, and she wiped her palms on her apron, hoping he would not notice the slight tremor in her hands. "Afternoon," Preston said, that warm smile already in place. "I brought you something." She took the bundle curiously, unwrapping it to find a selection of candied ginger, a rare treat in Monticello. "You did not have to do this. I wanted to. The general store owner said you come in every month and look at the ginger but never buy it for yourself. Figured you deserved a little sweetness," he shrugged, suddenly seeming almost shy. "If that is too forward, I apologize. It is not too forward, it is thoughtful." Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the forge. "Thank you, Preston. Just Preston is fine. We are not formal at Double Creek." He watched as she set the candy aside carefully, then gestured to Solomon. "Ready to outfit this fellow." The process of fitting the horseshoes took the better part of an hour, and Zelda was acutely aware of Preston's presence the entire time. He helped when she needed it, holding Solomon steady and talking to the horse in low, soothing tones. He asked intelligent questions about the work, genuinely interested in learning the finer points of the craft. And he watched her with an attention that was flattering rather than uncomfortable, as if everything she did fascinated him. When she finished the last nail and stepped back to admire her work, Preston ran his hand down Solomon's leg, checking the fit. "Perfect," he pronounced. "He is going to move like a dream in these. If there are any issues, bring him back and I will adjust them at no charge," Zelda said, falling back on professional courtesy because she did not quite know how to navigate the personal interest humming between them. "I will remember that." Preston paid her the agreed price plus a generous tip that she tried to refuse until he insisted. Then he looked at the sun, still a few hours from setting, and raised an eyebrow. "You about ready to close up shop? I am eager for that tour of Monticello." Marcus appeared from the back room with suspiciously convenient timing. "Go on, Zell. I can handle anything that comes up, not like we are swamped with work right this minute." She shot her brother a look that promised later retribution for his lack of subtlety, but removed her heavy work apron and grabbed her lighter shawl. "All right then. Let me show you what there is to see." They walked down the main street, Preston leading Solomon, since the horse was newly shod and deserved an easy afternoon. Monticello was not a large town, established only recently as Mormon settlers pushed into this corner of Utah territory. The buildings were mostly simple wood construction, practical and sturdy rather than elegant. But there was a church with a proper bell tower, a schoolhouse, the general store, a boarding house, and the handful of businesses that served the surrounding ranches and farms. "It is not much compared to larger towns," Zelda said, suddenly seeing her home through a stranger's eyes and finding it wanting. "Pretty isolated out here." "I like isolated," Preston said. "Less noise, less complication, just the land and the work and folks who matter." He glanced at her. "Where are you from originally?" "Right here. My parents were among the first settlers. My father saw opportunity as the only blacksmith within 50 miles. She pointed toward the small cemetery on the edge of town. "They are both buried there now. Mother died when I was 8, father when I was 12. That must have been hard growing up without them." Marcus stepped up. He was young, but he was determined to keep the business going, keep us fed and housed. She smiled, remembering. "I insisted on helping in the smithy, and at first he tried to tell me it was not appropriate. But we needed the help, and I was strong enough to do the work, so eventually he stopped arguing." They had reached the far end of town, where the buildings gave way to open land stretching toward red rock formations in the distance. The desert landscape had a stark beauty, all russet and gold under the afternoon sun. Preston paused, taking it in with evident appreciation. 10 years, he said thoughtfully. "You have been doing heavy smithy work since you were 12, and you are how old now?" 22, old enough to be firmly on the shelf as a spinster, according to local wisdom. She tried to keep her tone light, but some bitterness crept through anyway. Preston turned to face her fully, and his expression was serious. "Zelda, I need to tell you something straight out, because I am not good at dancing around subjects. I am 25 years old. I have been working ranches since I was 15, drifting from place to place, never staying anywhere too long. I have met hundreds of people in that time, men and women both, and I have met very few who impressed me as much as you did in the first 5 minutes of knowing you." Her breath caught. "Preston, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we just met. I know this might seem sudden, but I also know that sometimes you meet someone and you just understand right away that they are important, that they are going to matter to you. And I think you matter, Zelda. I think you matter a great deal, and I would like the chance to know you better, to see if what I am feeling is the start of something real." Zelda's throat felt tight, emotions swirling through her in a confused tangle. Hope and fear and longing and disbelief, all competing for dominance. "People say I am too strong," she whispered. "Too much. Not feminine enough. I know what I am, Preston. I am not delicate or helpless or any of the things men seem to want in a woman." "You think I want delicate and helpless," he laughed, but it was not unkind. "Zelda, I work with cattle and horses and land that will kill you if you are not strong enough to face it. I have spent 10 years watching weak men try to play at being cowboys and failing because they do not have what it takes to endure. Strength is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to value, to cherish. Mrs. Thornton said no decent man would want a wife stronger than himself," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "Then I reckon I am not decent by Mrs. Thornton's standards, because I think a wife who is strong is exactly what any sensible man should want." Preston reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused from rain, leather, and hard work, and his grip was firm but gentle. "You are strong enough for the life you have chosen, Zelda. You are strong enough for whatever comes. And if anyone in your life is lucky enough to earn your affection, I hope they are smart enough to see that strength as the gift it is." She looked down at their joined hands, rough skin against rough skin, the hands of people who worked for their living. Something inside her chest loosened, a knot of tension she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten it was there. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted. "I have never been courted. I have never been the kind of woman men looked at that way. Then we will figure it out together, because I am not exactly experienced at courting strong-willed blacksmiths either." His smile was crooked and utterly charming, "But I am willing to try if you are." "I am willing," she said, and the words felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They walked back toward town slowly, still holding hands, talking about everything and nothing. Preston told her about growing up in Kansas, about losing his own parents to cholera, and making his way west looking for a place that felt like home. Zelda told him about the satisfaction of creating useful things, about the way metal spoke to her in its own language of heat and malleability. They discovered they both loved thunderstorms, both hated raisins, both harbored a secret fondness for silly songs that made no logical sense. By the time they reached the smithy again, the sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Zelda felt lighter than she had in years. Preston squeezed her hand before releasing it, clearly reluctant to let go. "Can I see you again? Not just as a customer, I mean." He looked almost nervous, which she found endearing. "I would like that. I am usually here during the day, but evenings I am free. We could have dinner sometime if you can get away from the ranch. I will make it work." He mounted Solomon with easy confidence, settling into the saddle. "Thank you for the tour, and for taking a chance on someone you barely know. Thank you for seeing me as I am instead of as what people think I should be," she replied. She watched him ride away, that same warm feeling from yesterday now blazing bright in her chest. Marcus appeared at her elbow, grinning like a fool. "That went well, I take it." "He wants to court me," Zelda said wonderingly. "He actually wants to court me, Marcus. Of course he does. Anyone with eyes and sense would want to court you. It is about time you found someone who has both." Marcus draped an arm around her shoulders. "Come on, let us close up shop and I will make dinner. You can tell me all about this cowboy who has you grinning like you just won a prize." Over the next few weeks, Preston became a regular fixture in Zelda's life. He stopped by the smithy whenever his work brought him into town, always finding an excuse to need something repaired or sharpened. They took walks in the evening when she closed the shop, exploring the trails around Monticello, talking until the stars came out. He brought her little gifts, nothing expensive but always thoughtful. Interesting rocks he found on the range, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, a hair ribbon in a shade of blue that matched her eyes. And gradually, the walls Zelda had built around her heart began to come down. She let herself laugh freely at his jokes, even the terrible ones. She shared her dreams with him, the secret hope of maybe one day opening a second smithy in a larger town, of teaching other young women that they could do this work if they wanted. She allowed herself to believe that his interest was genuine, that he truly saw her strength as an asset rather than a flaw. The town noticed, of course. Monticello was too small for secrets. Zelda heard the whispers, saw the speculative looks. Some people seemed pleased, happy to see her finding companionship. Others, like Mrs. Thornton, were openly disapproving, as if Preston's attention somehow validated Zelda's inappropriate life choices. But for the first time, Zelda found she did not care what the gossips said. She had something real and good, and she was not going to let small-minded people take that away from her. One evening in late September, Preston arrived with a picnic basket and an invitation. "There is a place I want to show you, about an hour's ride from here. Would you come with me tomorrow?" I cleared it with my foreman to have the afternoon off. "Where are we going?" she asked, intrigued. "It is a surprise. Bring a coat, though. It might get chilly." The next day, Zelda borrowed a horse from the livery and met Preston at the edge of town just after noon. They rode southeast, following a trail that climbed gradually into higher country. The red rock formations grew more dramatic, towering walls of stone carved by wind and water into fantastic shapes. Preston led them through a narrow canyon, the walls rising high on either side, then out into a hidden valley that took Zelda's breath away. A small lake reflected the impossibly blue sky, fed by a waterfall that cascaded down the far cliff face. Cottonwood trees clustered around the water's edge, their leaves just beginning to turn gold. The whole place felt secret and magical, untouched by human presence. "How did you find this?" Zelda breathed, dismounting and turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I was chasing strays last month and got turned around in the canyons. Found this by accident." Preston spread a blanket on the grass near the lake and began unpacking the picnic basket. "I thought you might appreciate somewhere beautiful and quiet. Somewhere you could just be yourself without the whole town watching and judging." They ate bread and cheese and apples, drank cool water from the lake, and talked about everything under the sun. Preston told her stories about his years of drifting, the characters he had met and the places he had seen. Zelda described her dreams in more detail, admitting fears and hopes she had never voiced to anyone but Marcus. "You think I am foolish?" she asked at one point. "Wanting more than this? The town thinks I should be grateful to have the smithy, that a woman in my position should not aspire to anything grander. I think you should want exactly what you want and not let anyone tell you different," Preston said firmly. "And I think you have the skill and determination to make it happen. You just need the right opportunity and the right support. And you," she looked at him directly, needing to know. "What do you want, Preston?" He was quiet for a moment, his honey-colored eyes serious. "Honestly, I want to stop drifting. I want to put down roots somewhere, build something lasting. I have been saving my pay carefully, and I have almost enough to buy some land of my own. Nothing huge, but enough for a small ranch, a place that is mine." "That sounds wonderful," Zelda said softly. "It would be even more wonderful if I had someone to share it with." Preston reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Zelda, I know it has only been a few weeks, but I need you to know that this is not a passing fancy for me. What I feel for you is serious and real." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I feel the same way. It scares me, honestly. I have never felt this way about anyone before, and I do not know the rules. I do not know how to be what you might need. You do not have to be anything but yourself. That is all I want, all I will ever want." He leaned closer, his intention clear, giving her time to pull away if she chose. Zelda did not pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was like the missing piece of a puzzle finally sliding into place. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper as confidence grew. Preston's hand cupped the back of her head, and she gripped his shirt, holding on as the world seemed to tilt and rearrange itself around this new, dizzying joy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Preston pressed his forehead to hers and laughed softly. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks." "So have I," she admitted. "I just did not think I was allowed to want it. You are allowed to want anything and everything, Zelda. And I intend to spend as long as you will let me proving that to you." They stayed at the hidden lake until the sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in shades of crimson and gold. The ride back to Monticello passed in comfortable conversation, their horses walking side by side. When they reached town, Preston insisted on seeing her all the way to the smithy, despite her protests that he would have a long ride back to the ranch in the dark. "Worth it," he said simply, helping her dismount. "Zelda, I want to do this properly. I want to court you the right way with everyone knowing my intentions. May I speak to Marcus formally, ask his blessing? He will say yes," she said, smiling. "He has been waiting for someone like you to come along. Then I will come by this Sunday after church. Wear your prettiest dress." He grinned at her shocked expression. "What? You did not think I failed to notice that you own more than work clothes, did you? I just never saw much point in wearing nice things to get covered in soot," she protested. "Wear something nice on Sunday, not for me but for yourself. Let the whole town see you as the beautiful, capable woman you are." That Sunday, Zelda wore a dress of deep blue cotton that she had made herself 2 years ago and rarely worn. She braided her dark hair and even put on the silver earrings that had belonged to her mother. Marcus did a comical double take when she came down for breakfast. "Should I be worried? Are you feeling well?" He pressed the back of his hand to her forehead in mock concern. "Stop it," she said, swatting him away but unable to suppress a smile. "Preston is coming by after church. He wants to talk to you. About his intentions toward my sister, I presume." Marcus's expression sobered into something warm and approving. "Good, I like him, Zell. He is steady and honest and he looks at you the right way." "What is the right way?" she asked curiously. "Like you hung the moon, and he cannot quite believe his luck in finding you." Church was its usual mixture of hymns and sermons and social obligation. Zelda tried to focus on the words, but her mind kept wandering to Preston, wondering if he was nervous, if he had rehearsed what he wanted to say to Marcus. Mrs. Thornton shot disapproving looks her way throughout the service, clearly having noticed Zelda's unusually feminine appearance and drawn her own conclusions. After the service, as people milled about outside exchanging pleasantries, Preston appeared on Solomon, dressed in clean clothes that looked suspiciously new. He dismounted and approached Zelda and Marcus with a confidence that was only slightly undermined by the way he clutched his hat in both hands. "Marcus, could I have a word? In private?" Preston's voice was steady, but Zelda saw the tension in his shoulders. "Of course." "Zelda, why do you not wait here? We will just be a moment." Marcus clapped Preston on the shoulder and led him a short distance away, the two men's heads bent together in conversation. Zelda tried not to stare, tried not to obviously eavesdrop, but it was impossible not to watch. She saw Marcus ask questions, saw Preston answer with clear sincerity. At one point, Marcus laughed and shook Preston's hand vigorously. Then they were walking back, both wearing satisfied expressions. "Well," Zelda demanded, unable to contain her impatience. "Preston has asked permission to court you with serious intentions," Marcus said formally, though his eyes twinkled. "I have given my blessing and told him that the decision ultimately rests with you." "As if there was any doubt," she said, feeling her cheeks heat with a blush. "There should not be doubt in these matters. You should always know you have a choice." Preston held out his hand to her. "Zelda Everhart, may I have the honor of courting you properly, with the goal of eventually asking for your hand in marriage if you prove willing." The words were formal, old-fashioned even for 1883, but they made her heart soar. "Yes," she said, placing her hand in his. "Yes, absolutely yes." The small crowd that had gathered outside the church erupted in applause and well wishes, most of the townspeople genuinely happy for her. even Mrs. Thornton could not quite maintain her disapproving frown in the face of such an openly romantic declaration. Constance, standing behind her mother, caught Zelda's eye and mouthed congratulations with a shy smile. The months that followed were the happiest of Zelda's life. Preston courted her with unwavering devotion, managing to visit town several times a week despite his demanding work schedule. He met her friends, the few people in Monticello who had always accepted her as she was. He helped out around the smithy when he could, learning from both her and Marcus, always eager to understand more about their craft. And he continued to surprise her with his absolute acceptance of her strength, never once suggesting she should tone it down or hide it away. In November, they went riding again to the hidden lake, this time bundled in heavy coats against the increasing cold. The cottonwood trees had lost their leaves, and the water reflected a gray sky, but the place was still beautiful in its stark way. They built a small fire and sat close together for warmth, talking about the future. "I finalized the purchase of my land yesterday," Preston said quietly. 70 acres about 10 miles south of town. There is a creek running through it, good grass for cattle, and a stand of timber that could be used for building. Zelda's breath caught. "Preston, that is wonderful. You must be so proud." "I am, and I am terrified." He laughed nervously. "It is one thing to dream about having your own place, another thing to actually commit to it. The land is raw right now, just open range. It will take years to build it into a working ranch. You will do it. You are one of the most determined people I have ever met." She squeezed his hand, believing it absolutely. "I will do it faster if I have help, the right kind of help." Preston shifted to face her fully, his expression serious and a little scared. "Zelda, I know we have only been courting for a few months. I know the traditional thing would be to wait longer, make sure we are compatible. But I have never been more sure of anything in my life than I am about you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Zelda's heart stopped, then started again at triple speed. Preston opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small red stone set in it. "This was my mother's ring. It is not fancy, but it is all I have of her, and I would be honored if you would wear it." He swallowed hard. "Zelda Everhart, will you marry me? Will you help me build a life on that land, be my partner in all things?" Tears blurred her vision, happy tears that she did not bother trying to hide. "Yes. Oh, Preston. Yes, of course I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he was kissing her with a fierce joy that matched her own, and she was kissing him back, pouring all her love and hope and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, Preston pulled her into a tight embrace. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love your strength and your skill and your stubborn determination. I love the way you laugh and the way you think. I love everything about you, Zelda." "I love you too," she whispered back. "I never thought I would find someone who accepted all of me, but here you are, and I love you so much it scares me. Nothing scary about love. It is the best thing in the world." He pulled back to look at her, his honey-colored eyes bright with unshed tears of his own. "When should we do this? I do not want to wait long, but I want to do right by you." "Spring," she decided. "That gives us time to plan properly. For you to start work on the ranch buildings, for me to figure out how to adjust the smithy business with Marcus. Spring is for new beginnings." They told Marcus that evening, and he swept Zelda into a hug so tight it nearly squeezed the air from her lungs. "I am so happy for you," he said thickly. "You deserve this, Zell. You deserve all the happiness in the world." "What about the smithy?" she asked, guilt creeping in around the edges of her joy. "I cannot leave you to handle everything alone." We will figure it out. Maybe take on an apprentice, someone who can learn the trade properly. Or maybe I will finally settle down myself and find someone to help." Marcus grinned at Preston. "You take care of my sister, Ellis, or you will answer to me." "I plan to spend the rest of my life taking care of her," Preston promised. "Though honestly, she is more than capable of taking care of herself. I am just lucky she is willing to let me stand beside her while she does." The news spread through Monticello faster than wildfire. Most people reacted with genuine happiness, pleased to see one of their own finding love. A few, predictably, had less generous reactions. Mrs. Thornton made pointed comments about how Zelda had better learn to be properly submissive as a wife, how no man would tolerate a wife who could outwork him. But those voices were quieter now, drowned out by the well-wishers and the growing sense that maybe, just maybe, the old rules about what women could and could not be were ready to change. Winter settled over Utah territory with crystalline cold and occasional snow. Preston spent every spare moment working on his land, and whenever Zelda could get away from the smithy, she joined him. Together they planned where the house would go, where the barns and corrals should be built. She helped him fell trees and drag timber, her strength proving invaluable for the heavy work. And slowly, the raw land began to transform into something that looked like a homestead. "What should we call it?" Preston asked one frigid January afternoon as they stood surveying their progress. The frame of a small house stood against the gray sky, rough and skeletal but unmistakably real. "Call what?" Zelda stamped her feet, trying to keep warm. "The ranch. Every spread needs a name." She thought about it, looking around at the land that would soon be her home. "Sanctuary," she said finally, "because that is what it feels like, a safe place where we can be exactly who we are." Sanctuary Ranch. Preston tested the name, then smiled. "I like it. Sanctuary Ranch it is." They were married on a brilliant April morning in 1884, with the whole town in attendance at the church. Zelda wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Marcus had secretly commissioned from a seamstress in Blanding, insisting that his sister deserved something special. Preston wore a new suit that made him look almost uncomfortable until Zelda whispered that he cleaned up quite handsomely, which made him relax and grin at her. The ceremony was traditional and brief, the vows simple but profound. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed her with such enthusiasm that the congregation laughed and applauded. Walking back down the aisle as Mrs. Zelda Ellis, her hand tucked into her husband's arm, Zelda felt a happiness so complete it was almost overwhelming. The reception was held in the church hall, with food provided by seemingly every family in Monticello. There was music and dancing and endless congratulations. Even Mrs. Thornton approached to offer stiff best wishes, though she could not quite resist adding that she hoped married life would soften some of Zelda's more unfortunate rough edges. "I hope it does not," Preston said cheerfully, overhearing. "I happen to like her edges exactly as they are, thank you kindly." As the sun began to set, Preston helped Zelda onto Solomon while he mounted a second horse, and they rode out of town toward Sanctuary Ranch amid cheers and thrown rice. The house was finished now, small but solid, with a bedroom and main room and a kitchen that Zelda had already begun to make her own. Preston had built the furniture himself over the winter, every piece crafted with care. He carried her over the threshold as tradition demanded, though she protested that she was perfectly capable of walking. "Let me do this," he murmured. "Let me have this one moment of feeling like I am taking care of you, even though we both know you are strong enough to carry me." "I could probably carry you," she agreed, laughing. "But I like letting you be romantic about it." That first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet and occasionally awkward in the way of two people learning each other's bodies and hearts. But it was also filled with laughter and whispered promises, and the bone-deep certainty that they had chosen right, chosen well, chosen each other against all odds. The years that followed were not always easy. Building a ranch from nothing required backbreaking work, long hours and occasional setbacks that tested their resolve. But they faced every challenge together, partners in the truest sense. Zelda continued to do metalwork, building a small forge at Sanctuary Ranch so she could create the tools and hardware they needed. She became known throughout the region as one of the finest blacksmiths around, man or woman, and Preston never missed an opportunity to boast about his wife's skills. In the spring of 1885, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy was relatively easy, perhaps because she was so strong and healthy from years of physical work. She continued working the forge through her 7th month, only stopping when Preston started to worry that the heat might be bad for the baby. Their son was born in January of 1886, squalling and healthy and perfect. They named him Daniel Marcus Ellis, combining Preston's father's name with her brother's. Marcus himself rode out from Monticello within hours of receiving word, bearing gifts and wearing the most ridiculous grin anyone had ever seen on the normally serious Blacksmith. "You are going to be a wonderful mother," Marcus told Zelda as he carefully held his new nephew, "just like you are wonderful at everything else you do." "I have no idea what I am doing," she admitted. "He is so small and fragile. What if my strength hurts him somehow?" "Your strength has only ever built and protected," Preston said gently, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It will not hurt our son. It will keep him safe and teach him to be strong in his own way." Preston was right, as he often was about such things. Zelda took to motherhood with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. She was not a traditional mother by the standards of the time. She continued to work, continued to be deeply involved in running the ranch, and refused to pretend that her entire identity was wrapped up in domestic duties. But she loved Daniel with a ferocity that sometimes surprised her, and she poured that love into making sure he knew he was cherished and valued. By 1887, Sanctuary Ranch had grown into a thriving operation. They had a small herd of cattle, good horses, and a growing reputation for quality stock. Preston had hired 2 hands to help with the work, young men who were respectful of Zelda and who quickly learned that the boss's wife was every bit as competent as the boss himself. The ranch supported them comfortably, and they had even managed to save a bit for the future. Marcus visited regularly, and he brought news from town. The smithy was doing well. He had indeed taken on an apprentice, a surprisingly skilled young man who was learning the trade quickly. And Marcus himself had started courting the widow who ran the boarding house, a sensible woman named Helen who had 3 half-grown children and no patience for nonsense. "I think I might finally be ready to settle down properly," Marcus admitted to Zelda one summer afternoon as they watched Preston and Daniel playing in the yard. The boy was 18 months old now, toddling everywhere with determined enthusiasm. "Watching you and Preston, seeing how happy you are together, it made me think maybe I was missing out." "You were," Zelda said, smiling. "But it is never too late to find your person. Helen is good for you. She challenges you but supports you. Kind of like how Preston is with you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Exactly like that." Marcus and Helen married that fall, a quieter affair than Zelda and Preston's wedding but no less meaningful. The families blended easily, Helen's children taking to Marcus with the same pragmatic acceptance their mother showed. And suddenly, Zelda had not just a husband and son but a whole extended family, loud and chaotic and wonderful. In 1888, Zelda became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder, perhaps because she was older now at 27, perhaps because she had more responsibilities. But she made it through, and in the spring of 1889, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Mee, after Preston's mother and Zelda's own mother. Sarah was a quiet baby compared to Daniel's boisterous infancy, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. She seemed to have inherited her mother's strength, though. Even as a baby, her grip was remarkably firm. Preston joked that they would have to build a second forge when Sarah was old enough, because she clearly had blacksmithing in her blood. The 1890s brought changes to the Utah Territory and to Sanctuary Ranch. Utah was pushing toward statehood, and the region was slowly being settled by more and more people. Monticello grew, adding new businesses and families. The old frontier wildness was fading, replaced by something more civilized, though not necessarily better. Zelda and Preston adapted to the changing times while holding firm to the values that had brought them together. They taught their children that strength came in many forms, that work was honorable regardless of who did it, and that love meant accepting people exactly as they were rather than trying to reshape them into something more convenient. Daniel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved horses and had a gift for gentling even the most difficult animals. Sarah proved to have not just strength, but a keen spatial intelligence that made her a natural at anything mechanical. By the time she was 8 years old, she was helping Zelda at the forge, learning to shape metal with the same skill her mother possessed. In 1895, Marcus and Helen's oldest son, Jacob, came to work at Sanctuary Ranch as a full-time hand. He was 19, responsible and hardworking, and he brought with him a steadiness that Preston appreciated. The ranch continued to prosper under their combined efforts. But it was in 1896, the year Utah finally achieved statehood, that something happened which tested everything Zelda and Preston had built together. A drought struck that summer, the worst anyone could remember. Water sources dried up, grass withered to brown stubble, and cattle began to die. Ranches all over the region struggled, many going under entirely. Sanctuary Ranch suffered along with everyone else. They lost a quarter of their herd that first terrible summer, and the second summer looked to be just as bad. Money grew tight. Difficult decisions had to be made about which stock to keep and which to sell at a loss. The stress wore on everyone. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching another sunset over parched land, Preston dropped his head into his hands. "I do not know if we can hold on," he admitted, his voice rough with exhaustion and fear. "We have been so careful, so prudent, but you cannot plan for this. I might lose everything, Zelda. I might lose the ranch." "We might lose the ranch," she corrected gently. "This is not just yours, Preston. It is ours, and we will figure it out together." "How? How do we figure out a drought?" He sounded close to breaking, and her heart ached for him. Zelda was quiet for a long moment, thinking hard. Then an idea began to form, risky but possible. "My forge work," she said slowly. "I have been treating it as a side project, something to help out around the ranch. But what if I focused on it seriously? Took on commissions from surrounding towns, built a real business out of it." Preston looked up, hope warring with concern in his expression. "You would have to work constantly. The kind of orders you would need to make real money, that would be exhausting." "I am strong enough for it," she said firmly. "Preston, you have spent years telling me that my strength was a gift. Let me use it now to save what we have built together." Over the next 6 months, Zelda threw herself into metalworking with single-minded determination. She took on every commission she could find, working long hours at the forge to produce tools, hardware, decorative ironwork. anything people needed. Word of her skill had spread over the years, and now she leveraged that reputation into steady business. Preston handled the ranch and the children, refusing to let Zelda shoulder everything alone despite her protests that she could manage. They worked as a team, supporting each other through the endless difficult days. Daniel and Sarah, old enough now at 10 and 7 to understand that times were hard, pitched in however they could without complaint. It was brutal, exhausting work. There were days when Zelda wondered if they would make it, if even her considerable strength was enough. But every time doubt crept in, Preston was there with quiet encouragement, with faith in her abilities, with love that never wavered. Slowly, painfully, they climbed back from the edge of disaster. The drought finally broke in the spring of 1897 with rains that turned the desert green again. The forge business Zelda had built sustained them through the worst of it, and then became an additional source of income once the ranch recovered. They emerged from the crisis scarred but intact, their partnership tempered like steel in fire. One evening that summer, as they sat together watching Daniel practice his roping while Sarah helped Preston mend fence, Zelda leaned her head on her husband's shoulder. "We made it," she said softly. "We did, because you were strong enough to save us." Preston kissed the top of her head. "I have never been more grateful for your strength than I was these past 2 years, Zelda. You were right all along. You were exactly as strong as you needed to be." "Strong enough for us," she murmured, remembering those early days when he had first defended her against Mrs. Thornton's criticisms. "That is what you said, way back at the beginning, that I was strong enough for us. And I was right. You have always been strong enough for yourself and for me and for our children and for this land. Your strength is the foundation everything else is built on." She lifted her head to look at him, this man who had seen her true self from the very first day and had never asked her to be anything different. His honey-colored eyes still held the same warmth and acceptance they had held in 1883, perhaps deepened now by years of shared trials and triumphs. "I love you," she said. "I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you always." "And I will love you always," he replied. "My strong, capable, extraordinary wife." They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, their children's laughter carrying on the warm evening breeze, the land stretching green and alive around them. It was not the life anyone would have predicted for the blacksmith sister who had been called too strong, but it was exactly the life she had built for herself, one hammer strike at a time. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Daniel grew into a young man who eventually took over much of the ranch operations, allowing Preston to slow down a bit as age caught up with him. Sarah, brilliant and determined like her mother, shocked the community by announcing she intended to become an engineer, a radical ambition for a woman in 1902. But with parents like Zelda and Preston, she had never doubted that she could achieve anything she set her mind to. Marcus and Helen remained close, their combined family providing a network of support and love that sustained everyone through good times and hard. Marcus eventually retired from the smithy, passing it on to his apprentice, and he and Helen traveled to California, something they had always dreamed of doing. Mrs. Thornton, surprisingly, mellowed with age. In her 70s now, she actually approached Zelda at church one Sunday in 1903 and admitted, grudgingly, that perhaps she had been wrong to judge so harshly all those years ago. "You built a good life," the old woman said. "Proved me wrong about what a woman could do. I suppose I owe you an apology for all those unkind words." "Water under the bridge," Zelda said graciously, and meant it. The past no longer had power to hurt her, not when the present was so full and rich. In 1905, at the age of 44, Zelda looked around at everything she had created and felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Sanctuary Ranch was thriving. Her children were healthy and pursuing their dreams, and her husband still looked at her with the same love and respect he had shown that first day in the smithy. She still worked metal when the mood struck her, still reveled in the feel of shaping iron to her will, but she no longer had to prove anything to anyone. She knew her own worth, and that was enough. Preston, now 48, had a bit more gray in his hair and a few more lines around his eyes, but he was still the same steady, loving presence he had always been. They still took rides out to the hidden lake sometimes, just the two of them, to remember where they had first admitted their love. And they still held hands like newlyweds, fingers intertwined, two people who had chosen each other and never regretted it for a moment. One autumn evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over land they had tamed together, Preston said, "You ever regret it? Choosing this life with me instead of maybe moving to a bigger town, opening that second smithy you used to dream about?" Zelda considered the question seriously, as she considered all his questions. "No," she said finally, "I do not regret a single moment. This life here with you, raising our children on this land, it has been more than I ever imagined possible. I am content, Preston, truly content. So am I." He squeezed her hand. "You know what the best part is? Knowing that I get to spend the rest of my life with the strongest, most capable woman I have ever met, and knowing that she chose me." "We chose each other," she corrected. "And I would choose you again, 1,000 times over." They sat in companionable silence as the stars began to emerge, one by one, in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sounds of Sarah working on some mechanical project, the girl's mind never still, always creating. Daniel was out checking the herd one last time before full dark, responsible and thorough as always. Everything was as it should be. Everyone was where they belonged. And Zelda Everhart Ellis, who had once been told she was too strong for any decent man to want, who had believed for too long that her strength made her unwomanly and unlovable, knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly strong enough. Strong enough for the work she loved, strong enough for the family she had built, strong enough for the man who had looked at her and seen not a problem to be solved but a partner to be cherished, strong enough for them, strong enough for everything. Daniel married in 1908. Bringing home a sweet-natured rancher's daughter named Emily who fit seamlessly into the family. Sarah left for college in Denver, one of only a handful of women studying engineering, and she sent letters home filled with excitement about her studies and the future she was building. Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1910, surrounded by family, having lived to see his sister happy and his business legacy secured. Preston and Zelda became grandparents for the first time in 1909, when Daniel and Emily's son was born. They named him Marcus Preston, honoring both grandfathers, and Preston cried unabashedly when he first held the tiny baby. "We started something good," he told Zelda that night. "Look what we built together." "We did," she agreed, watching him rock their grandson with the same careful tenderness he had shown their own children. "We built something that will last," and it did last. The love story that had begun in a dusty smithy in Monticello, Utah in 1883, grew and deepened and spread like roots through good soil. It weathered droughts and hardships, celebrated triumphs and joys, and proved that strength, real strength, was not just about how much weight you could lift, but about how much love you could hold. On a perfect spring morning in 1912, Preston surprised Zelda by leading her out to a newly finished structure on their property. It was a beautiful workshop, larger and better equipped than her old forge, with proper ventilation and modern tools. "What is this?" she asked, delighted and confused. "You said once that you dreamed of maybe teaching other young women that they could do metalwork if they wanted," Preston said. "Well, you are only 51 years old, Zelda Ellis. That is plenty of time to start teaching, if you want to, that is." She walked through the workshop, running her hands over the anvil, the forge, the carefully organized tools. It was perfect, everything she might have designed herself. "You built this for me." "I did, with help from Daniel and some of the hands. Took us 6 months working in secret." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "You spent years proving that women can be strong in ways the world did not want to acknowledge. Maybe it is time to pass that knowledge on to the next generation." Zelda turned in his arms, cupping his face in her work-roughened hands. "Have I told you lately that you are the best thing that ever happened to me?" "Not since breakfast," he teased, "but I never get tired of hearing it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Preston Ellis. The very best thing." They kissed in the doorway of the new workshop, surrounded by the tools of creation, and it felt like coming full circle. From that first day when he had walked into the smithy in Monticello and seen her for exactly who she was, to this moment nearly 30 years later, Preston had never wavered in his support, his love, his absolute belief that her strength was a gift to be celebrated rather than a flaw to be hidden. Over the next few years, Zelda did indeed begin teaching. Young women came from miles around to learn from the legendary Blacksmith of Sanctuary Ranch. She taught them not just how to work metal, but how to stand firm in the face of criticism, how to trust their own capabilities, how to understand that strength came in many forms and all of them were valuable. Sarah came home from Denver in 1914 with a degree in engineering, and a quiet, bookish professor named Thomas, who looked at her with the same adoration Preston had always shown Zelda. They married that summer in a beautiful ceremony at Sanctuary Ranch, and Sarah announced plans to start a consulting business, helping ranchers and farmers improve their operations through better engineering. Preston and Zelda watched their daughter marry with full hearts, knowing they had raised a woman who would never doubt her worth or hide her light. And when Preston whispered, "We did good," Zelda could only nod agreement, too overcome with emotion to speak. The First World War touched even remote Utah, taking some of the young men from the area to fight overseas. Sanctuary Ranch contributed what it could to the war effort, raising money and supplies. Daniel, exempted from service due to his work providing food for the nation, threw himself into keeping the ranch productive during those difficult years. Through it all, Preston and Zelda remained the steady center, the example everyone looked to. They had been married over 30 years now, and their love had only deepened with time. They still took walks together in the evening when weather permitted. They still held hands like teenagers. And they still looked at each other with the wonder of two people who had found exactly what they needed in each other. In 1918, as the war finally ended and the world began the difficult work of healing, Preston fell ill with the influenza that was sweeping the globe. It came on suddenly, and despite Zelda's fierce determination to nurse him through it, he grew worse rather than better. The doctor came from Monticello and gave them the truth gently. Preston was dying and there was nothing to be done. Zelda refused to accept it at first. She was strong enough to save him, strong enough to force life back into his failing body through sheer will. But strength could not stop disease, could not turn back mortality. All her capability meant nothing in the face of this most human of limitations. On a cold November night, with his family gathered around him, Preston Ellis drew his last breath. His honey-colored eyes found Zelda one last time, and he smiled, mouthing, "I love you," before slipping away. He was 61 years old, and he had lived every day of their life together with integrity and devotion. Zelda felt something fundamental break inside her as she held her husband's cooling hand. The grief was enormous, overwhelming, threatening to drown her entirely. But even through the pain, she held on to what Preston had taught her. That strength was not just about enduring, but about continuing, about choosing to go on even when it seemed impossible. They buried Preston Ellis on a hill overlooking Sanctuary Ranch, the land he had claimed and tamed and loved. Zelda stood dry-eyed through the funeral, her children on either side of her, and she made a silent promise to the man who had been her partner in all things. She would continue. She would honor what they had built by keeping it strong and vital. She would not let grief destroy what love had created. The years that followed were hard in ways that had nothing to do with physical labor or financial struggle. Zelda missed Preston with an ache that never quite faded, a constant awareness of his absence like a phantom limb. But she kept her promise. She continued teaching young women at her workshop. She remained actively involved in the ranch, working alongside Daniel to keep the operation running smoothly. She loved her grandchildren with fierce devotion and eventually welcomed great-grandchildren as well. Sarah's engineering business flourished, and she made a name for herself as one of the most innovative thinkers in agricultural development in the region. She named her first daughter Zelda, and watching her granddaughter grow into a confident, capable young woman gave Zelda a sense of continuity, of legacy on quiet evenings. Zelda would sometimes ride out to the hidden lake, the place where she and Preston had first admitted their love. She would sit by the water and talk to him, telling him about the grandchildren he had missed meeting, about the ways the ranch had grown and changed, about how much she still missed him even after all this time. "I was strong enough," she would say to the wind and the water and his memory. "Just like you always said I was. Strong enough to survive even losing you, though I would give anything to have you back." In 1925, at the age of 64, Zelda sat on her porch with her great-grandson on her lap, a bright-eyed boy of 3 named Preston, who had inherited his great-grandfather's honey-colored eyes. Sarah and Daniel were both there with their families, along with Helen, who was now in her 80s but still sharp as ever. "Tell us the story again, grandmother," young Zelda asked. She was 12 now, fascinated by family history, about how you and great-grandfather met. So Zelda told the story one more time, about the cowboy who had walked into her smithy in the summer of 1883 and seen her not as too strong but as exactly right. She told about how he had defended her against those who criticized, how he had courted her with respect and devotion, how he had built a life with her based on mutual support and unwavering love. "He sounds perfect," young Zelda sighed romantically. "He was not perfect," Zelda corrected gently. "No one is, but he was perfect for me and I was perfect for him. That is what matters in love, finding someone whose imperfections fit with yours, who sees you truly and loves you anyway." "You miss him terribly?" Sarah asked softly, though she already knew the answer. "Every single day," Zelda admitted. "But I am grateful for every moment we had together. 35 years of marriage and not one day wasted. He taught me that my strength was a blessing, not a curse, and that lesson changed my entire life." As the sun set over Sanctuary Ranch, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson, Zelda felt a sense of profound peace. She had lived a long, full life, had loved deeply and been loved in return, had built something lasting that would continue long after she was gone. Her strength, the very thing people had once told her made her unmarriageable, had been the foundation for everything good in her life. She thought of Preston's words from that very first day, when Mrs. Thornton had told her she was too strong. "You are strong enough for the life you have chosen. You are strong enough for whatever comes." He had been right, as he was right about so many things. She was strong enough, had always been strong enough, would always be strong enough. And the greatest gift was that he had recognized it when even she had doubted it herself. Zelda Everhart Ellis lived to the age of 73, passing away peacefully in her sleep in 1934, surrounded by the family she had helped create. They buried her next to Preston on that hill overlooking Sanctuary Ranch, and on her headstone, they carved the words he had said to her in defense against small-minded judgment. "Strong enough for us." The ranch continued through the generations, each new custodian honoring the legacy of strength, love, and unwavering partnership that Zelda and Preston had established. Young women continued to come to the workshop, learning metalwork and, more importantly, learning that they could be strong in whatever way suited them best. The story of the blacksmith's sister and the cowboy who loved her became family legend, passed down through the years as an example of what true partnership looked like. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light hits just right, people swear they can see two figures standing on the hill by the graves, holding hands and watching over the land they claimed together. The love they built still enduring, still strong, still perfect in all its imperfect human glory.